Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining me. The Artist Series at a Distance. It just gets better and better. I have in my presence the great Buster Williams. Buster, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Buster, I go back many, many years when I was younger to come by and hear you play on many, many occasions, and you always were just deep into the music. And every time I hear you play, it was something different. It wasn't like the set before. It wasn't like the night before. It wasn't like the week before. You always delivered a unique performance every single time.
I'm glad to hear that. That's the objective.
Well, they say that's the objective, but the key thing is you are able to deliver that. So I want to go back and capture that story of when you were younger. Tell me about when you were younger, growing up in Camden, and about your dad. Your dad was a musician, played drums, bass, piano.
Well, bass was his real heart. It's the instrument he really loved. I would hear music in the house all the time because his friends would come over, and whatever band he was in or whatever duo he was in, they always rehearsed at the house. And he practiced every day. So I would hear him playing alone or him playing with his friends. It was always a joy to just sit and listen. We had one of those upright roller pianos. I don't know if people remember that, but the piano had pedals.
Yeah.
And you opened the panel in front of you, and you put these rollers in, and you press these pedals, and they would play the music on the rollers. And also you could play the piano itself without without these rollers. My first instrument was the piano, but I didn't stick with it. And then I asked my father to teach me the drums. So he was happy to comply. So he said, okay, wait here. So he went upstairs, and he came back downstairs with a little pad with built this way, like, it was made out of wood, and there was a rubber round little thing on the top. And he gave me that, and he put these two drumsticks in my hand. And he said, but before he put them in my hand, he sat the pad down, and he said, blop, 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 blop. And then he said, mama, daddy, mama, daddy, mama, daddy. And I'm looking at him, and I'm thinking, my father, I know he's of sane mind, I never saw my father as old or young. He was just a giant, And I said, what is it that he doesn't understand? And I said, Dad, and then he put the sticks in my hand, and he said, okay, plop, do the plop, 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 plop. So I tried that, and he said, always, bring your hand back, ready for the next strike. And then he had me do plop, 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 with those mama, daddy. I'm trying that. And I said, but Dad, I want to play the drums. He said, well, this is how you learn how to play the drums. Oh, I was so dismayed. That ain't what I heard Art Blakey doing. And Max Roach, and because he had all of these records, and he had Jimmy Lunsford Band and Count Basie and all of the great drummers, and Cozy Cole. I didn't hear them guys playing this stuff. So he said, well, this is what you have to practice if you want to learn how to play the drums. So I did it, but I did it for one purpose, to get good enough for him to set up the drums for me down in the basement.
Hmm.
And he finally set up the drums for me down in the basement, and boy, oh, heaven had descended to earth. And I went down there and I started banging around, and but even after a while, the thrill of going outside and playing baseball after school, took over. And so I didn't stick with the drums. One day he played me a record by Oscar Pettiford. You probably heard this story before, right?
It was Stardust, I believe is what it was, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oscar Pettiford was playing Stardust, a solo on Stardust. And the way he was recorded, I could hear his thumb squeak as he moved up and down the neck of the bass. And, as I listen to this, I'm relating to everything that I see. I've watched my father do this, intently I've watched him. And this squeak, not only was he just playing beautiful music, but this squeak seemed to get into my soul. And it drew me in. And after he played the record finished, I told my father, said, Dad, you got to teach me the bass. Yeah. I want to play the bass. This was the icing on the cake. And he told me no and walked away. Now I'm really, confused. So that evening, I asked my mother, I said, Mom, I asked Dad to teach me to play the bass. I really want to play the bass. And she said, Buster, your father, his heart is the bass. You wanted to learn the drums, and you did that until you got bored. You wanted to learn the piano, and he put his heart into teaching you the piano, but you didn't stick with it. And he's reluctant to teach you the bass, because if you don't stick with it, it will break his heart. I'm saying to myself, okay, whatever, but oh, Mom, listen, so don't worry. I really want to play the bass. I'll stick with it. No problem, Mom, no problem. And I convinced her. And so she said, okay, I'll speak to your father. The next day, my father took me aside, and he had the sternest look in his face. And his eyes said everything. And he said, okay, if I teach you the bass, you're going to do everything that I tell you. You're going to have your lessons ready when they're supposed to be ready. You're not going to question anything that I say. And, now I'm agreeing because I'm afraid, because his eyes are saying like, and if you don't, I will kill you. So anyway, my father, now he had two basses, and his idol was Slam Stewart. And Slam Stewart, had this unique way of playing arco and singing along with the zoo 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 zoo, and it was beautiful. And in order to play in more comfortable positions, he restrung his bass. He took off the E string, which was the low string, and put a C string on top as the highest string. So he tuned the bass C, G, D, and A. A was his lowest string, and C was his highest string. And so he could play high passages in more comfortable positions, rather than being all up in thumb position and down you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And so my father had both of his basses tuned that way. So he took one bass and retuned it, put on a new set of strings, the traditional way. G, the highest string, then D, A, and E being the lowest string. And there began my journey into the unknown. And boy, was it the unknown. My father, I had to, do everything correct with my left hand and my right hand. And at the end of the day, my hands would hurt. My fingers would hurt because then, I had to develop the
callus.
quality, like the leather quality in my fingers, I had to get these blisters.
Yeah.
And you couldn't burst a blister, you had to play it out.
That's what created the callus, right?
That created the callus.
Yeah.
And if you stuck a pin in the blister and drained it, because it was filled with blood, and if you drained it, then you just had to start all over again.
Right.
You had to play until this blister bust all by itself. And boy, did I, day by day, I regretted, my promise to my father. But as my blisters started to turn into calluses, but I was enjoying what he was teaching me. And I was a young man of 13 years old. And I'm 70, I'll be 79 next month.
Beautiful.
And there's not a day that goes by that I don't respect my father more than I did yesterday because of what he did for me.
Well, what a beautiful story. So, I mean, at that time you're learning, was he taking you through scales? Were you learning changes? Were you learning tunes? What was he giving you?
He was taking me through all of the things that I had to learn physically. He was taking me through all of the things that I had to learn mentally. He was taking me through all of the things that would be the basis for my own creativity, which was changes, which was, the physical, use the correct fingerings, and it was well disciplined. Because of my fear of death, I did it all diligently, but it was also a joy, and I had to sacrifice no baseball, no going out after school. I had to play my lessons, and I had to have them ready for him. It was a challenge and a sacrifice, but one that I am so glad I adhered to.
Well, this sounds like it was really old school learning, which is always the best foundation for learning an instrument, which is really, really incredible. So let me get this right. You're in junior high school. Your dad double books himself and sends you on the gig?
Well, this is, you're talking about when I had my opportunity to play with Gene Ammons and Sonny Stitt.
Yeah.
Now, this was when I was 17 and I was graduating from high school, but in preparation for all of that, my father would take gigs as a drummer and take me as the bass player. And so I learned the whole idea, of playing gigs and how to play with a drummer. And being on the bandstand and how to really support, the soloist. And, I was with Jimmy Heath by now. So I had graduated from Camden and went on into the scene in Philadelphia. And for me, I mean, that was it. You get to work in Philadelphia, you made it.
That was big time, yeah.
That's big time.
Yeah.
Plus, in those days, all of us, me and of course, during all this time, I'm with other guys that are, coming up also, and we all wanted a 6-night gig. To have a gig that would go for 6 nights, my goodness, now you've made it, man. And you'll probably make $30 a week. My goodness. So so Nelson Boyd, that who Charlie Parker wrote Half Nelson for.
Yeah.
Nelson was, played with Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie, and he was a good friend of my father's. He lived in North Camden. We lived in South Camden. And school had just come out, finished, for the year, and it was summertime. I was over my girlfriend's house. Her name was Brenda. And I'm getting ready to take Brenda to the movies. It's about 7 o'clock in the evening. My father calls me over there. Brenda's mother picks up the phone and says, "Buster, your father's on the phone." And I said, "Wow, what's going on?" So picked up the phone. My father said, "Come home, put your suit on. You got a gig." I said, "But Dad, I'm getting ready to go to movies." And he hung up the phone. So I knew, do not hesitate. Get my butt home. So as I'm walking out the door, I holler upstairs to Brenda. I said, "Brenda, I gotta go. I got a gig." And Brenda said, "You got a what?" And by that time I'm out the door. I never, ever saw or spoke to Brenda again. So I went home and I put on my gig suit. The gig suit was a dark blue gabardine. And you always had a white shirt ready and a black skinny tie that you never untied. You only slipped the knot down far enough to get the loop over your head. And this knot was held together by nights and nights of sweat. And wherever you could tell by the parts of your jacket that have turned purple what instrument you played. And for me, sometimes, up here would turn purple. The pants, in your groin turn purple, because that's where the bass would lean. So I put on my gig suit and I went on over to the Showboat in Philadelphia. And this was big time, man. I cannot tell you. My goodness, what has happened? This has all happened, there doesn't seem like there was any preparation for this, but of course there was. I had been preparing since I was 13 years old. So I played after the first set, Gene Ammons and Sonny Stitt, they took me aside and, said, "Okay, you hired. You want to stay with the band?" And I said, "Of course." They never called me Buster. They called me JR for Junior.
Junior, yeah.
So for the year and a half that I was there, before Gene Ammons stranded the band, I was JR. And they treated me so beautifully. And that's this story is all in my movie.
You've got a documentary coming out soon.
Yeah, in fact, I think this week it becomes available on Amazon.
And I know, Herbie Hancock is talking in there.
Yeah, it's a lot of different people in there. Herbie Hancock, Benny Golson, Christian McBride, Rufus Reed, Larry Willis, a lot of different people in it. Kenny Barron, Lenny White. It's called Bass to Infinity.
Well, I think what's amazing, Buster, is that you You continue to play and inspire and really, create on the spot all the time differently. Where do you think that comes from, that ability of being able to improvise immediately upon will?
There's no mystique about this. First of all, my great fortune was that I was taught to understand my responsibility.
Hmm.
My responsibility as a creative musician, my responsibility as the driving force of the band, my responsibility as the bass player in the band. And I was taught to really know that nobody else in the band could do what I do.
Hmm.
Right? Because there's only one bass player in the band. Right? So if I shun my responsibility, then something that's essential to the success of the music is missing.
Hmm.
It was taught to me in a way that, I have a tremendous pride in what I do. And I have tremendous pride in that responsibility. And in no way does my responsibility limit me. So because of my responsibility and my understanding of it, my heart is into what I do every time I get up on the bandstand.
Yeah.
It's like life or death. I remember Art Blakey told me one time, he said, we're all going to die. He said, you know where I want to die? On the bandstand. And also all of my predecessors and all of the people that I had the fortune, to learn from, this was their attitude.
Hmm.
Not a single one of them had an attitude that deviated from that. You're putting your life on the line up there on the bandstand. This music requires that. This music demands that. And the whole purpose of your being is to honor that.
Well, your level of commitment is inspiring. It really, truly is. What was it like the first couple of recordings that you did? What did that feel like now, being in a studio and recording and playing, your first two, Dig Him and Boss Tenors. Those are, two great early recordings. What was that like to now step into that world?
That was that was like leaving Earth and going to some strange new planet. Those two records we did in a few days. That was with Gene Ammons and Sonny Stitt. Piano player was John Houston. The drummer was Dude Brown from Washington, D.C. Realized, I had never been in a recording studio before.
Hmm.
Except that, once I was in a recording studio, and that was when I was singing in a doo-wop group called the Dynaflows. And, the piano player in that group was Leon Huff, who became, part of the famous duo that produced the great Philly sound, Gamble and Huff. So we had left Philadelphia, the Showboat, 5:00 in the morning, Sunday morning. We finished the gig Saturday night, and by the time everybody got themselves ready to go, it was about 4 or 5 in the morning, and we went straight into the recording studios.
Hmm.
The next day. In fact, that day. Now, I didn't know. All I know is, we're in the studio and I take my bass out and they put a mic in front of me and we start playing. Now nothing was ever rehearsed. There was never a time that we rehearsed in that band. I don't remember even ever having a piece of sheet in front of me. We played the record date I think we went into the studio again the next day and played. I guess I got paid for it, whatever, $150 or whatever it was,
Yeah.
and I had a business sense to a degree, but it sure didn't outweigh the excitement of what I was doing. Now, Sonny Stitt had a fish-tailed white Cadillac.
Nice.
Gene Ammons had a yellow Chrysler Imperial. They were both brand new cars. Gene Ammons always wanted me to ride with him, but Sonny Stitt always wanted me to ride with him. So I had to, like every other day, ride with one or the other. But this particular day, I was riding with Sonny Stitt, and we got into the car, and as I got in the car, he handed me a bow. A bow, for playing the bass arco.
Yeah.
I had a bow because my father told me, he says, a plumber never leaves the house without his plunger. And a bass player never leaves the house without his bow. So Sonny Stitt gave me this bow, and to this day, I have that bow.
Beautiful.
So that's what it was, to be in the recording studio with these giants, for the first time in my life. And, and they were giants. I mean, in fact, I didn't know we were making 2 records. I thought we were making 1 record, but I found out, well, that's the way things go. But I learned a lot from that. I learned a lot about the business. I learned how to be prepared. In other words, having questions answered. And also being prepared to play the music. That whole experience, it went on for about 1.5 years until we were in Kansas City, and Gene Ammons, Sonny Stitt wasn't with us on this gig. We worked 2 weeks in Kansas City, and Gene Ammons left the night of the closing after the gig and without paying us. But I had learned enough to know that he wasn't getting away with that. So I actually sued him through the American Federation of Musicians and got all my money.
Interesting. So there was a business side of you that you understood your craft as far as performing, but you also understood the clarity of business needs to be fair.
Yeah. See, my father was, I like to say, didactic by nature. He taught me in what he did, in what he said, and I understood to be his intent. So he had talked to me about the business of music also. Plus the fact, when I was leaving, I had packed my suitcase and it's 3:00 in the morning. And I got to get back over to the showboat to meet the guys and drive on to Chicago. And my mother gave me a Bible. And she says, your first paycheck, I want you to try and put enough money in this Bible to always have your bus fare home. I did that, except that when we did get stranded, I didn't have it. But that's another story.
You went on to play with some of the greatest vocalists. I mean, Betty Carter, Sarah Vaughan, Carmen McRae. What was it like to play behind singers of that quality?
My first big time singer was Dakota Staton. She had this big hit called The Late Late Show. I joined her after she had made that record, and it was a hit. So she was hot stuff. I was working with a trio in Wilmington, the piano player named Gerald Price, drummer named Billy Davis.
Mhm.
And she came through Wilmington, and her husband, who was her manager, but he was a trumpet player that had been with in Dizzy Gillespie's band.
Hmm.
And he hired the trio. He hired the trio. He liked us. We were playing somewhere. So we joined Dakota Staten as the trio.
Hmm.
And so that was my first big time gig with a singer. After Dakota Staten, I joined Betty Carter. Betty Carter was a real mentor. And I left Betty Carter after a while to join Sarah Vaughan.
Yeah.
That bass that you see right behind me is the bass that Sarah Vaughan gave me the money to buy in London on my first trip to Europe with her. This was in 1963.
Hmm.
And we went to Europe. This was the first time I'm ever in Europe. And I found this bass in London. So she gave me the money to buy this bass. Then I went from Sarah Vaughan to Nancy Wilson.
What a great lead of singers that you're playing with. These are the best of the best. What was it like with Nancy Wilson?
If I could say one thing of what I learned from each one of them, I learned something unique from each one of them. Dakota Staten, I learned how to program a set, you know, and how to capture the audience as quickly as you can.
Hmm.
You know, we always opened up with something fiery that caught everybody's attention. And she had their attention from that point until the end of the last song.
Hmm.
And with Betty Carter, I used to tell her, Betty, after we play the downbeat of a ballad, I can go out and have lunch and get back in time to play the second beat. She would sing a ballad so slow, that it taught me discipline and patience and empathy and how to really get inside the music and how to make one note say so much.
Hmm.
Sarah Vaughan, she had perfect pitch.
Yeah.
We were rehearsing once with a big band, and she stopped the band and pointed to the second trumpet player and told him to tune up. I said, oh boy, I don't want her to ever hear me play a sour note. So I learned, the importance of playing in tune. And with Nancy Wilson, we had a thing that we did called Yesterdays, the Beatles Yesterdays.
Nice.
Not the yesterdays that I had learned, in the jazz vernacular.
Not the jazz standard, yeah, the pop.
Yeah. And it was just her and me. And she would let me start it off any way I wanted to. I was really concerned about that at first because whatever I play, I need to play this again tomorrow and then the next night. No, I could play something totally different each night. And she came in where she was supposed to come in every time. She had these big ears, and Betty Carter Sarah Vaughan had told me about ears. She said, your ears is so big you could hear a rat piss on cotton. So anyway, so I learned all of these different things from these, fantastic vocalists. And I also learned the importance of learning a lyric. If there's a lyric to a song that you're going to play, even there's no singer, learn the lyric. It's going to make a whole lot difference in the way you play the song.
Listen, you played shows with Art Blakey, Herbie Mann, Mary Lou Williams, Dexter Gordon, McCoy Tyner, Stanley Turrentine, Frank Foster. I mean, there's just so many great legends that you played with, which I'm sure that there's, you've got the documentary. There's got to be a book inside of you somehow also.
Yeah, I've been encouraged um, to write a book or write a memoir or something. Hopefully, I'll do that. But it was always uppermost in my mind. Who wants to read my book? You know what I mean? I mean, there's so much documented about really great people, and I never assumed that what I had to say would carry the kind of weight of these people that I admire.
Well, I know when I interviewed Jimmy Cobb, he had nothing but great things to say about you and how comfortable you were to play with all the time. And I think there are lessons that younger generation can learn from the amount of experience and wisdom you've been able to take in through all these years.
Now, let me say something about Jimmy Cobb. Uh, I've known him for the longest time. And when Paul Chambers passed away, I had just left Nancy. It was in 1968. I had been out in California from 1965 to 1968. And I had gone out there because my wife and I got married in 1965. Nancy was her maid of honor. And as a wedding gift, she moved us out to California. She wanted, she was moving her operation out to California. We were going to do California and Las Vegas. She was moving into a whole different era of her career. And so she moved us out to Los Angeles. And in 1968, after, about 5 years with Nancy, I was ready to come back to New York. And really, and actually this would be my beginning of my career in New York, because I had never established a residence in New York before that. So we came back to New York. Paul Chambers passed away.
Yeah.
And I think we were living at the Wellington Hotel. Jimmy Cobb called me. And, because they had the trio, Jimmy Cobb, Wynton Kelly, and Paul Chambers.
Yeah.
And he called me, and I began working with the trio. I took Paul Chambers' place. That was amazing. Playing with Wynton Kelly night after night, and Paul and Jimmy Cobb. And as I'm playing, all I can hear is Paul Chambers. Because he was my hero. Yeah. So now I'm taking his place. And I mean, it was hard to sort of like get him out of my head, so that I can do something. Maybe I can play a couple notes the way I would play them, But, I figured there's no better way to play these notes than Paul Chambers.
Well, you also had the chance of backing up Ron Carter.
That was interesting, too. It was a real democratic quartet. And I never felt like I was backing up Ron Carter. It was an equal opportunity thing going on there. And, needless to say, I was very influenced by his deliberation, the deliberateness of Ron Carter. He's a real master. And I learned so much. We had that quartet for 5 years. I learned so much, and I enjoyed every moment of it. I learned what I wanted to do, and I learned what I didn't want to do.
Interesting.
Yeah.
equally as valuable, I'm sure.
Mhm. Right, right.
And then Grammy-nominated award when you worked with Hank Jones and Tony Williams.
Yeah.
Love for Sale.
Love for Sale, yeah. You know, Hank Jones, he played piano like a swimmer that just glides through the water like a fish and never makes a wave. You know? And I remember doing a tour, we went on tour, and Idris Mohammed was on this tour, the drummer.
Yes.
And every night we get off at the end of the show, as we come off the bandstand, Hank would look at me and say, he says, "Buster, I heard every note." And then he would say, "There'll be a little extra in your pay envelope at the end of the week." You know, because I mean, I never felt so, oh yeah, I'm so happy you heard every note. I mean, it was kind of unsettling because there was many notes that I played that I hope you didn't hear. You know, yeah, we got a Grammy nomination for that. He liked candy bars.
Hmm.
And whenever we went in the studio, he would sit down at the piano and take his candy bars and sit them on the edge of the piano. You know? And by the end of the session, those candy bars be gone. Yeah, Hank Jones. He had introductions to songs like nobody else.
Yeah.
The only other person that could play an introduction like that for me was Roland Hanna.
Hmm.
Roland Hanna, their introductions were like symphonies,
Yeah.
and it would be different for the same song every night. Incredible.
Well, what's incredible are the names, Art Blakey's, the Quincy Jones, Branford Marsalis. There's so many, musicians that have encompassed the Buster Williams legacy, which to
And
me
don't
is,
forget about Miles Davis.
oh well,
That was a dream come true when he called me for that.
I mean, what was that like when you got the call from Miles Davis?
I got the call from Herbie Hancock.
Hmm.
Now I had met Herbie and Tony and George Coleman and Ron Carter and Miles Davis in 1963 when I took my first trip to Europe with Sarah Vaughan. See, before we went to England and Sarah bought me this bass, we were in Jean Le Pont, right down the shore from Nice. And we played the festival. So for a week, we were on this festival. Miles Davis was also on this festival. And it was outdoors, like in a band shell. And we were all staying at the same hotel. And so I met them all down by the pool, and I became friends with all of those guys. And after the gig, we would go and play jam sessions. Not Miles, of course, but the rest of us. There was a British tenor player that was on there, Tubby Hayes. Tubby Hayes was a hell of a player, and we became friends. And it was 1963. I'm what, 17, 18, 19 years old, something like that, or 20 or something like that. And so I got the call from Herbie to join Miles in 1967, 5 years later. And I had just moved out to California, Nancy had financed the trip to bring me and my new bride, my wife, out to California. And so Herbie calls and says, "Hey man, we're going into the both and in San Francisco tomorrow, and Miles wants to know if you can make the gig." And I said, "Can I make the gig? Am I still on Earth?" you know, sure. So I went up there and made the gig, and it just so happened that Nancy had just took 5 weeks off.
Beautiful.
And it was a 5-week tour.
Beautiful.
And so, and by this time I was on retainer with Nancy. So I went and joined Miles, played the 5-week tour, and Nancy paid me every week, and Miles paid me. It was a dream come true.
Boy, what
Miles asked me, to stay with the band. And I said, I had a house in Granada Hills. I had a yellow Corvette Stingray.
Mm.
I had the beginning of every year, I had a new year itinerary, and a promise of payment every week,
Beautiful.
whether I worked or not. And I couldn't give that up.
Mm.
I couldn't give that up for the uncertainty. Anything less than that was an uncertainty,
Yeah.
I mean, I was spoiled. I was spoiled. So that brief moment with Miles taught me everything.
Mm.
Taught me everything, and we stayed friends, till he passed away.
Beautiful. Let me ask you this question, Buster. What kind of advice would Buster Williams today give advice to the Buster Williams of 13 years old?
If I knew then what I know now, I would hope that I would be so much further ahead.
Hmm.
When you say these kind of things, there's no, you got to be in the moment. When you're 16 years old, you're 16 years old.
Hmm.
You ain't supposed to know what what you're supposed to know at 50. My father told me, he says, just getting older doesn't mean that you get wiser. You might have, more experiences, but it's all about what you learned from all of those experiences.
Hmm.
He said, but just remember, there's no fool like an old fool. So, I've tried to remember that, but it didn't necessarily keep me from making the mistakes, that come with growing, that come with learning, that come with experimentation. Fortunately, I had a firm enough footing, to not go too far off of deep ends. I would say protect yourself. Learn what there is to learn. And you do it not by running your mouth, but by shutting up and listening. My father, he also told me, he said, a mouth that's running is a brain that ain't learning nothing. So I'm just happy that I've had all of these experiences and had these opportunities. Through my Buddhist practice, I started chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo in 1972. I really learned the importance of gratitude. and how gratitude is the best nutrient for one's brain. And so, you know, I mean, I find immense joy in being grateful. And, you know, you never know how far you're going to go, you know, but whatever, you got to be in the moment. And when it's time to take the step, you got to take the step, you know. So, and whatever step I take the totality of my life with me.
Those are absolutely beautiful words, Buster. And I say your father was a very, very wise man. And I can see the apple did not fall too far from that tree.
Yeah.
You absolutely have captured an incredible amount of wisdom. And every note you play has deep wisdom. Every performance you play, you give of yourself. And the gratitude is not only what you're saying you feel, but it's the gratitude that we have in being blessed by your art, your music, and just the kindness of your soul. For that, we thank you so much on the Artist Series. Buster, you are a legend. What an absolute honor. Thank you so much. Live long and keep on sharing your great talent. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. All the best to you.
Dom Famularo here, the Sessions panel. This is so exciting. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Click the subscribe button to be a part of what we're doing. The views help us tremendously. All of your comments, we read them and react to them. This is incredible. The support you're giving us is great. The Sessions panel. We'll see you real soon.